Hi, Doc Martin for KRAZ TV and the Zero Channel. Well, it's the book reviews. I've been remiss for not having done it in a while. But this, I hope, makes up for it because, to me, it's a seminal work. El Norte, the epic and forgotten history of Hispanic North America by Carrie Gibson, author also of Empire's Crossroads. Oh, it's a really in-depth, to tell you, she said it can't start until the day that Columbus hit the shores of Hispaniola or wherever it was over there near Dominican Republic. It is a book from Atlantic Monthly Press. There's her picture. There's a little map in the back here that shows where the Adams-Onis Treaty line of 1819. So they actually forced them that no more Spanish could come north of that. But they did go all the way to Vancouver Island. Anyway, Carrie Gibson is the author of acclaimed Empire's Crossroad, a history of the Caribbean from Columbus to the present day. She received a PhD from Cambridge University focusing on the Spanish Caribbean in the era of the Haitian Revolution, and has worked as a journalist for The Guardian and contributed to other publications as well as the BBC. She has done research across Mexico, the West Indies, and the United States. She lives in London. Well, yeah, in the back here it says the route of some of the explorers was the very first was Ponce de Leon, Cortez, Pineda, Quejo, Vaca, de Soto, Coronado, Alacron, Ferrer, Luna, Oñate, Vizcaino, Anza, Bodega, and Dominguez Escalante in 1776. Oh my goodness. A sweeping saga of the Spanish history and influence in North America over 5 centuries. That's a long time. Because of our shared English language, as well as the celebrated origin stories of the Mayflower and the rebellion of the British colonies, the United States has prized its Anglo heritage above all others. Yeah, at the expense of others too. That's my rant. However, as Carrie Gibson explains with great detail and clarity in El Norte, the nation has much older Spanish roots, ones that have long been unacknowledged or marginalized. The Hispanic past of the United States predates the arrival of the Pilgrims by a century and has been every bit as important in shaping the nation as it exists today. El Norte chronicles the sweeping and dramatic history of Hispanic North America from the arrival of the Spanish in the early 16th century to the present, from Ponce de Leon initial landing in Florida in 1513 to Spanish control of the vast Louisiana Purchase in 1762 to the Mexican-American War in 1846, and up to the more recent tragedy of post-hurricane Puerto Rico and the ongoing border acrimony with Mexico. Interwoven with a stirring narrative of events and people are cultural issues that have been there from the start and which are unresolved to this day. Language, belonging, community, race, and nationality. Seeing them play out over centuries provides vital perspective at a time that is most urgently needed. In 1883, Walt Whitman meditated on his country's Spanish past. We Americans have yet to learn our own antecedents and sort them to unify them, predicting that to the composite American identity of the future, Spanish character will supply some of the most needed parts. That future is here, and El Norte, a stirring and eventful history in its own right, will make a powerful impact on our national understanding. Boy, that's true. Now they even show here in this map here that they went all the way up to state of Franklin. Wow, and across down into Mobile, Alabama, to New Madrid, and that's from northern Missouri. Wow. Or no, southern Missouri, North Arkansas, and then they went out in Texas, New Mexico, and all that. So, but they were in Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, Yucatan, Veracruz, all of that. It's fascinating. John Steinbeck, she writes, how will we know it's us without our past? That's true. So, that's interesting. I live here in Tucson, Arizona, and actually Tucson is a chapter in this book, but introduction is Nogales. Then it goes through New Mexico, Florida, Missouri, Nootka Sound, Canada. That's where they went to Vancouver, New Orleans, Sabine River. That was where it's near the border of Louisiana and Texas, and that was supposedly set the boundaries. Of course, they pushed them all the way to the Rio Grande eventually. The San Antonio, Mesilla, New Mexico. That was an interesting story. That was part in the Gadsden Purchase. Ybor City, Florida, Del Rio, New York. Now this is where people have integrated from the 1920s to the 60s. So she's got Los Angeles in the 20s through the 70s of 1970s, Miami through the 80s, Tucson, Arizona, 1994 to 2018. In the epilogue, Dalton, Georgia, 2014. Then in the back, she's got the line of key events and selected bibliography. So, they show the panhandle down here in Florida. The eastern part and the southern part was British West Florida, and then south of that along Pensacola Bay, Biloxi, Baton Rouge would be the west, independent state of West Florida, Spanish West Florida, and of course the British at the top. Wow, look at all these missions. I did not realize that there were a lot of Spanish mission sites in Florida. There must be 30 or 40 of them, and all up and down the coast, all the way to San Miguel de Guadalupe in 1526, Santa Elena in 1565. Wow. And let's see, did she have Spanish missions? Yes. Isn't that amazing? All up and down the spine here of just Baja California, there's another 20 or 30 missions all the way. And just one in Tubac and one in San Javier in Arizona. Then there's some around Mesilla and El Paso. And then down in El Paso, Texas, Cato, and the Sabine River, down towards Brownsville and all that. There were several more of these missions, but well, they don't show any down in Mexico. They do show the pueblos. There is a 1680 or somewhere, and there was this guy named Pablo that ran around and they had a knotted cord, and they coordinated an event. It took them 3 years to plan it, to run the Spanish out, because, see, the big thing is, to be accepted, they had to be converted to Catholicism. The Indians did not really care for that at all, but the ones that did, then they said, now you have to give us work, and they worked them and enslaved them around the mission works and all of that, especially in New Mexico, and they got, well, Zero Channel, I can say it, they got pissed off. And so they ran them out for a few years, which is amazing, amazing. And it just goes on and on through this wonderful book. It's a little bit about the islands, but mostly once they get over on land, they mostly always talk about the exploits in the United States. So, I guess it was 1846, Polk. They finally got a war with Spain, because in 1830s, Austin and some of those guys came to Texas, and they said, yeah, we want to become citizens and work here. And the Spanish said, well, we'll let you, but you have to convert to Catholicism. And that wasn't going over with them too well. So they violated everything they could and pissed the Spanish off some more. Finally, it settled down for a little while. And then it started taking back up in the war, Spanish-American War. And eventually, after they had pushed the boundaries to the Rio Grande, they went down into Veracruz and went across, the Americans, to New Mexico City and took it over for a while. In fact, it was in the Marine Corps, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli in their anthem. That was because they went through Mexico City. It was an amazing time, amazing. And then, of course, afterwards, there was punitive expedition against Pancho Villa, because that was much later now. In 1820s, they finally got freed from Spain. And I guess they just, in a blanket, according to my reading here, that they didn't have to fight the rebellion and all of that in all the different countries, Ecuador, Peru, and all that. They just, in a blanket, after Mexico and all of them forced the issue. They really tried to keep Cuba, but Cuba was kept under Spanish control until 1890, when we had the Spanish-American War, and Remember the Maine with Teddy Roosevelt and San Juan Hill and all of that. That's when we finagled Guantanamo Bay out of them, and we still hold that today. So a lot of impetus is put on keeping their territory that we've, snatched. And then the discrimination always did happen. They never did. Then they started bringing in the slaves to work the fields and all of that. Sugar cane. I guess there were more slaves working sugar cane until cotton. Then they figured out, well, we got to sell the British the cotton. So in the 1830s and all. But see, England by then, 1830-31, had started to abolish slavery. But some of them allowed the trade to go on because they needed the cotton. So they allowed Americans and whoever else sold cotton to the Brits to continue slavery for a while. Then, of course, you know the tragedy of the slaves was what Juneteenth was all about, is after Lincoln did emancipate all the slaves in America, they hid out in Texas. It was a state by then, and did not tell those people in Texas that they had been free. So they stayed another year and a half before they were freed as slaves in Texas. So, but that's not in this book. That's another story. But the inroads of Hispanics and their contributions and all is all mentioned in this book. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful story. It's a horrendous story, though, and it is all true. She's actually one of them done most of the work, and I learned a heck of a lot in habla aquí. So speaking here, I've learned and lived with Spanish and Mexican Americans and Hispanic people and indígenas and all of those here in the Southwest all my life. But I really learned a lot. And I really learned that a lot of it was in Florida and all of that, and New Orleans. And so then the French got the thing, and then the Spanish got New Orleans back. because we had bought the Louisiana Purchase in '03 with Jefferson, but Jackson was the Battle of New Orleans was 1815, and that's where he made his fame. But he's also the guy that started the Indian Removal Act, and when he was president, and that was caused the further demise of Native Americans. But this is really about the Spanish influence in the New World and everything else that went on. So I don't want to ramble on too much. Get the book. It's going to take you a couple weeks to read it, or it did me. But that's good. Anyways, we got this book at the Tucson-Pima County Library, you can get it at yours. Thank you for watching KRAZ-TV and the Zero Channel and our new book, El Norte, The Epic and Forgotten History of Hispanic North America by Carrie Gibson. Don't want to butcher names this early. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.